Good morning to our principal who will be conducting my COT. Today I will be giving my demonstration or presenting my demonstration lesson for COT. My topic is pairs of angles formed by parallel lines cut by a transversal. The objectives of this lesson is to identify pairs of angles, name pairs of angles from the figure, and of course, describe the importance of parallelism. But before that, let us have a short, let us pause for a moment for a prayer. And I would like to request everyone to put yourselves in the presence of God by putting yourselves into silence. Okay, good morning class. Today I will be giving you my lesson, but before that, before we will have to proceed to our new lesson, let's have first an activity regarding our lesson last meeting. So I have to group the students into 5 groups. Then once the class is being grouped already, I have here a word box with words inside or jumbled words inside. All you have to do is to arrange them first so you can answer the following questions below the word box. Here are the words inside the word box. And I'll give you 5 minutes to do it, and you should have to answer the questions, the 3 questions that I will be presenting, this one. And the answers of this are the arranged word inside the word box. So I will give you 5 minutes to do it, and your 5 minutes will start now. Okay, so let us just consider that the 5 minutes is already done. So I will repeat, there are 3 questions that will be answered with the jumbled words after arranging them. So these questions will be answered. So the first question, these lines do not intersect each other and they lie on the same plane. What do you think is the correct answer of the first jumbled word? Okay, the correct answer is parallel lines. So the first word in the jumbled word inside the word box is parallel lines. Okay, let's proceed to the next question. These lines lie on different planes. What do you think is the answer? Okay, so the answer is skew lines. Very good. And of course, let's have the last question. A line that intersects 2 or more coplanar lines at 2 or more distinct points. What is the word? Okay, let's have it. Let's reveal. Okay, the correct answer is transversal line. Okay, very good. So, as of the moment, the terms are transversal line, skew lines, and parallel lines. Do you know, class, that parallel lines and transversal lines have something to do with our new lesson for today? Do you know, class, that there are pairs of angles form when transversal line intersects parallel lines. So, for this morning, I will introduce to you the lesson that I will be presenting. May I ask everybody to please read aloud. Go! Pairs of angles formed by parallel lines cut by a transversal. Very good. Okay, so that is our lesson for this morning. So, to present my lesson, I will give you or show you a video that will really discuss better the topics on pairs of angles formed by parallel lines cut by...
Statue of Liberty, the world's best pizza, seriously the best, and the home of the world famous New Year's Eve ball drop at Times Square. Now we are going to go ahead and use Google Earth to take a closer look at the location of Times Square on the island of Manhattan. And now we can see from this map that the roads in New York City make a grid network of interlocking streets and avenues. Notice that our streets run somewhat horizontally and that they are all parallel to each other, and we should know that parallel lines never intersect. We should also notice that our avenues run somewhat vertical, and they intersect our streets in a way that makes them perpendicular or that they form right angles. And looking at the map this way should help us to better understand why, for the most part, Manhattan utilizes a grid system. Now notice that Times Square is located along a street that traverses this grid system. Now you have probably heard of this street before. It's called Broadway. And Broadway is unique because it does not run parallel to any of the other streets on the grid. And when parallel lines are cut by transversals, like in the case of the street map, we have some very unique and characteristic angle relationships, which we are going to go ahead and explore further in this lesson. So let's call an Uber and get out of the city. So now let's go ahead and extend our thinking. We can start out by looking at two parallel lines, and we'll say that CF is parallel to JK, and these parallel lines are cut by a transversal. Now just note that transversals can look a number of different ways. They can even be perpendicular. The point is that the angle relationships will always be the same, no matter how the transversal looks. But for this example, we will look at a transversal that is not perpendicular to the parallel lines. Now, when a transversal crosses through parallel lines, it creates a bunch of angles. And we want to go ahead and explore the relationships between these angles. Now, if we pinpoint on those two sets of angles, we should notice that they look pretty much identical. In fact, if we take our two parallel lines and overlap them on top of each other, we can see that the angle measures for either line are going to be identical. And this is a very important property of parallel lines cut by a transversal. Now, what this relationship tells us is that when we have parallel lines cut by a transversal, we can say that the corresponding angles are congruent. So if our obtuse angle on line CF were 122 degrees, then our obtuse angle on line JK would also be 122 degrees, again because corresponding angles are congruent.
Cool.
Now here comes the cool part. If you know one of those angles, you can find all of the remaining unknown angles. Let's start out with the angles directly opposite or vertical to the angle that we just found, which was 122 degrees. We know that vertical angles are always congruent, so in this case, the angles opposite are also 122 degrees. Okay, I'm cool with that, but how do we find the other angles? Now, we should remember that angles that are linear pairs are supplementary, meaning that they have a sum of 180 degrees. So if one of the angles of our linear pair is 122 degrees, I can find the other unknown angle by asking the question 122 plus what number would equal 180, which is the same as subtracting 122 from 180, whose difference is 58. So now I know that the supplement to 122 degrees is 58 degrees. And again, I know that all corresponding angles are congruent. And I also know that all vertical angles are congruent. So now I have enough information to fill in the measures of all the angles on the diagram. So now let's go ahead and look at another example of parallel lines cut by a transversal. And we'll try to make some generalizations about the relationship between the angles that are formed. So let's just say that we know that one of those purple angles has a measure of 30 degrees. Because we know that corresponding angles are congruent and that vertical angles are congruent, we know that all of the purple angles have a measure of 30 degrees. We also know that all of the orange angles have a measure of 150 degrees because they are linear pairs, meaning they are supplementary. So 180 minus 30 is equal to 150. And again, this should really drive home the fact that if you know one of those angles, you can find all of the angles. Now, since we are all about visual learning here at Mashup Math, I want to share with you guys something that I call the X's and O's mindset.
Ooh.
This is a helpful little technique for you to better understand the relationship between the angles in any situation involving parallel lines cut by a transversal. Now, this mindset involves differentiating between the obtuse angles and the acute angles using some kind of a diagonal mark. So in this case, I have a diagonal orange streak for the obtuse angles and a diagonal purple streak for the acute angles. Next, I'm going to label all of the acute angles with the letter X and all of the obtuse angles with the letter O. Now again, you can reverse this and make the acute angles O's and the obtuse angles X's. As long as you are consistent, this mindset method will still work. Now, with this visualization in mind, we can conclude that all the angles labeled with an X are congruent to each other, all the angles labeled with an O are congruent to each other, and any combination of an X and an O angle will have a sum of 180. So any XO combo represents a linear pair. So now let's go ahead and apply this XO mindset to an example question involving some algebraic expressions. So in this example, we want to find the value of X and find the angle measure of all the angles in the diagram. So in this case, we'll label our obtuse angles with X's and our acute angles with O's. And remember those angle relationships. Now in this case, we can see that our two algebraic expressions are both O's. So I know that I have to set them equal to each other since those two angles are congruent. And now all we have to do is solve. We can subtract X on the left side of the equation and subtract 26 on the right side. We can simplify and come to a solution that X has a value of 6. Now we are not finished here. In order to find the angle measures, we have to substitute 6 back into each expression. Doing that gets us an angle measure of 38 degrees for all of the acute angles, the O's, and subtracting that from 180 gives us 142, which is the measure of all of the obtuse angles, and now we have completed the entire diagram. So you may choose to use the XO method or some similar color coordinating method to better help you visualize the relationship between the angles that are formed when we have parallel lines cut by a transversal. So go ahead and use any method that you would like and try this problem on your own, and be sure to share your solution in the comments below. I'd love to.
So since the video presentation class is already done, so I am expecting that you understand better the discussion based on the video you have just watched. So for this time, I will give you the first activity, considering that you have understand, or to check whether you understand better the discussion. So for your first activity, the group you had in our first activity this morning will be the same group you'll have in this activity. You need to have these necessary materials in order to accomplish your activity. You have there the ruler, manila paper, and pencil pen. All you have to do is to follow the procedures for you to do the activity. And when you are done, say with action, clap, 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 champion! The group which can finish first will be declared as the winner and will receive a secret prize afterwards. Am I understood, class? Okay, very good. So here are the following procedures for you to follow in the given activity. So each of the group will perform this one. Number 1, draw a horizontal line and label it as line L. Another, draw another horizontal line below the line L and name it as line K. Draw a designated line intersecting the two lines, line L and line K, and name it as line T. Name the points of intersection as point X and point Y respectively. Is it clear, class? Okay, very good. So I'll give you 5 minutes to do it and your time starts now. So you have to perform your activity honestly. So I am expecting a quality output afterwards, after the given time. So considering that you are done with the activity and it's already 5 minutes, so let's proceed. Okay, let us see. Raise your work and let us compare how your work looks like. If it looks like the figure here presented and you are correct. Okay, very good. So this is how the figure looked like. So thank you very much for cooperating in the given activity. And in our discussion, we have discussed about pairs of angles, right? Formed by parallel lines and cut by transversal. You have noticed that parallel lines are essential in our discussion. Am I right? Yes, very good. In relation to a real-life situation, class, can you give a situation which involves parallelism? So, we have here an example wherein, or an example situation wherein parallelism is being applied. First, wearing or using your dress code. For an idealist perspective, whatever you wear in your trip, it should match with your bottom, and otherwise, you should look weird. Right? Another thing is, parallelism is very vital to every life of a person. Why? Because in everything that a person does, parallelism must be maintained. Even in the consistency of your words, your actions, and even your philosophy in life is essential to keep your good credibility. Okay, so that is how parallelism being applied in our real life situation. By the way, class, in our real world situation, how are parallel lines being applied? Okay, so these are the concepts where parallel lines are being applied and used. First is used in making bridges, roads, buildings, houses, windows, doors, household furnitures, and many others. If you remember the video, before the video started, it shows how parallel lines are being used. Okay, so I hope you will not make this topic useless, but instead you have to keep this in mind, that parallel lines are very important in our real life situation because of the following concepts that I have enumerated earlier. So for your practice exercises, I hope you understand better in the discussion by means of watching the video, and of course you are encouraged to learn the lesson or the topic because of the real concepts that I am giving you, that parallel lines are being used in many things, many approaches in life. I hope that you have catch up and understand better those things that I have mentioned earlier. So for this time, as an application of how far or how wide you understand the lesson, I will give you a practice exercises. So based from the figure at the lower left of the screen, the following pairs of angles, identify the following pairs of angles, whether alternate interior angles, alternate exterior angles, and or corresponding angles. So you have to make a table, or no, you have to have an answer in a form of this situation. This is the general instruction. Write 80 for alternate interior angles, and write also ET for alternate exterior angles, and CT for corresponding angles. Okay, you may now start. I'll give you another 1 minute to do the activity. Okay, so I hope you are done with answering, and this time I have now to reveal the correct answers. Here are the correct answers. So based on the figure at the left, these are the correct answers. First, what is the relationship between angles 3 and angles 6? Okay, the correct answer is alternate interior angles, AT. Angles 3 and 6, because it is located inside or within the transversal line. Another, angle 2 and angle 7. Angle 2 and angle 7. How would you relate the two angles? Okay, angle 2 and angle 7, this one. Angle 2 and angle 7 are alternate exterior angles because they are located outside, away from the transversal line. This is the transversal line here, this one. Okay, what about angles 4 and 8? 4 and 8. Okay, angles 4 and 8. Okay, angles 4 and 8 is considered to be corresponding angles. Corresponding. They are located on the same side of the parallel lines, right? They are located at the outer, then outer and left side of the parallel lines. Next is angle 1 and angle 5. Angles 1 and angles 5. Of course, again, it is a corresponding angles. They are located at the same side of the parallel lines. Angle 5 is located at the right side of the first parallel line, and angle 1 is located also at the right side of the other parallel line, the other line. What about angles 1 and 8? 1 and 8. What do you call angle 1 and angle 8? Okay, alternate exterior angles. They are located outside and they are located not on the same side of the transversal. If you will be looking from here to here, 8 is at the right side of the transversal, while angle 1 is placed or located at the left side of the transversal. So, who got the correct answer? Okay, very good. I hope everybody is understands better the lesson upon having this exercises, additional exercises. Okay. Another activity, this one is for you to understand better. Here, based on the figure below, name all the pairs of alternate interior angles, alternate exterior angles, and corresponding angles. So, in the previous activity, you're already given pairs of angles, then you are to identify whether they are alternate interior, alternate exterior, or corresponding angles. But by this time, you are the one to identify the angles or the pair of angles as to where it belongs, whether it is an alternate interior angles, alternate exterior angles, and of course corresponding angles. I will give you another 5 minutes to do the activity, and your time starts now. Okay, supposedly you are done with the activity. So this time I have now to reveal the correct answer. Okay, this is the table showing the list of pairs of angles that belongs to alternate interior angles, alternate exterior angles, and corresponding angles. So try to compare your answers there with the one shown on the presentation. Okay, how do you assess your outputs or the results of your activity? I hope you have understand better, and for this time, since I know you are given already enough exercises for you to develop and enhance your learning skills in the topic parallel lines cut by a transversal. So this time I will give you now for your assignment in order to determine and explore better in the topic that I'm discussing this morning. So we have here the direction. Draw a parallel lines cut by transversal. Use a protractor to measure the following. So you will be the one to use letters of the alphabets to label your transversal line and of course the parallel lines. Then you have to put a numbers representing the different angles so you can determine which are the alternate interior angles, alternate exterior angles, and of course corresponding angles. Thank you, and that's all for this morning. I hope I am giving you even just a pinch of a new learning for this morning. I hope this topic will be a useful one in the future. Thank you and Goodbye.